Sarah Martinez had always been the careful type. At 32, she lived alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everybody knew everybody else. Her small house on Maple Street was her sanctuary after long days working as a school librarian. The white picket fence, the rose garden she tended every evening, and the friendly neighbors who waved from their porches made her feel safe and secure. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Sarah was getting ready for work when she heard the doorbell ring. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a crisp white coat holding a clipboard. He looked professional, clean-cut, with wire-rimmed glasses and a warm smile. His white coat had a small embroidered logo that read, Metro Health Services. "Good morning, ma'am," he said politely when she opened the door, keeping the chain lock secured. "I'm Dr. James Collins from Metro Health Services. We're conducting a neighborhood health survey for the county. It'll only take a few minutes of your time." Sarah hesitated. She had never heard of any health survey, but the man looked legitimate. His white coat was spotless, his manner professional, and he carried what appeared to be official paperwork on his clipboard. More importantly, Mrs. Henderson from next door was standing on her porch, having what seemed to be the same conversation with another man in a white coat. "What kind of survey?" Sarah asked through the partially open door. Dr. Collins adjusted his glasses and consulted his clipboard. "We're checking on the general health and wellness of residents in this area. There have been some concerns about water quality and air pollution from the new construction project across town. The county wants to make sure everyone is healthy and address any issues before they become serious problems." That made sense to Sarah. She had noticed the construction noise and dust from the new shopping center being built 2 miles away. The local newspaper had even run a small article about residents' concerns regarding potential environmental impacts. "I really should be getting to work," Sarah said, glancing at her watch. "Oh, this won't take long at all," Dr. Collins assured her with a friendly smile. "Maybe 10 minutes at most. I just need to ask some basic questions about your health history and possibly take a quick blood pressure reading. It's all completely voluntary, of course, but the information helps the county provide better health care services to residents." Sarah looked over at Mrs. Henderson again. The elderly woman had invited the other man inside and was chatting pleasantly with him on her porch. If Mrs. Henderson, who was usually very cautious about strangers, felt comfortable with these health workers, then surely it was legitimate. "All right," Sarah said, unlatching the chain. "But I really do need to leave for work soon." "Absolutely understood," Dr. Collins said, stepping into her neat living room. "I appreciate you taking the time to help with this important community health initiative." The man looked around her home with what seemed like professional interest. He commented pleasantly on her book collection, mentioning that he too enjoyed reading mystery novels. When he noticed her cat, Whiskers, he smiled and said he had 3 cats of his own. Everything about his demeanor seemed normal and trustworthy. Dr. Collins sat down at her dining room table and pulled out several official-looking forms. "Now then, let's start with some basic information. Can you tell me your full name and date of birth?" Sarah provided the information, watching as he carefully wrote her responses on his clipboard. His handwriting was neat and precise, like a doctor's should be. He asked about her family medical history, any medications she was taking, and whether she had experienced any unusual symptoms lately, like headaches, fatigue, or breathing problems. "Have you noticed any changes in your water taste or smell?" he asked, making notes. "Any unusual odors in the air, especially in the evenings?" Sarah thought about it. "Well, now that you mention it, the water has tasted a bit different lately. Kinda metallic, and sometimes there's a strange smell when the wind blows from the construction site." Dr. Collins nodded seriously and made more notes. "That's exactly the kind of information we need. These environmental factors can have serious long-term health effects if not addressed properly." He then pulled out what looked like a small medical device from his bag. "Now, I'd like to take your blood pressure and maybe a quick blood sample for testing. The blood work will help us check for any early signs of contamination or health issues. It's completely painless and takes just a second." Sarah felt a moment of uncertainty. A blood sample seemed like more than a simple survey. But Dr. Collins had been so professional and knowledgeable, and the environmental concerns he mentioned were real. The construction project had been a topic of discussion at several neighborhood meetings. "Is the blood test really necessary?" she asked. "Not absolutely required," Dr. Collins said reassuringly, "but it gives us much better information than just the questionnaire alone. Think of it like when your regular doctor does routine blood work during your annual checkup. We're looking for the same kinds of things, just making sure everything looks normal and healthy." He showed her the small device, which looked similar to equipment she had seen at her doctor's office. "It's just a tiny finger prick, like what diabetics use to check their blood sugar. The sample goes to our lab, and if we find anything concerning, we'll contact you immediately so you can follow up with your personal physician." That reasoning made sense to Sarah. She was generally healthy, but if there were environmental contaminants affecting the neighborhood, she would want to know about it as soon as possible. Early detection was always better than waiting until symptoms appeared. "Okay," she agreed, extending her hand. Dr. Collins smiled warmly and prepared the device. "You're making a smart choice. Prevention is always better than treatment." As he pricked her finger and collected the blood sample, Sarah noticed his hands were very steady and professional. He labeled the small vial carefully with her name and the date, then placed it in what appeared to be a proper medical storage container. "Perfect," he said, packing up his equipment. "That's all we need for now. You should receive a letter with your results within 2 weeks. If anything looks unusual, we'll call you right away." Dr. Collins stood up and shook her hand. "Thank you so much for participating in this important community health program. Citizens like you help us keep the whole neighborhood safe and healthy." As he walked toward the door, Sarah felt good about her decision to participate. It was nice to know that the county was being proactive about potential health issues. Dr. Collins had been professional, knowledgeable, and genuinely seemed to care about the community's well-being. After he left, Sarah grabbed her purse and headed to work, thinking about how fortunate she was to live in a place where local government took such good care of its residents. She had no idea that her trust in the man in white would soon turn into her worst nightmare. 3 weeks passed, and Sarah had almost forgotten about the health survey. She was busy with the start of the new school year, helping students find books and organizing the library's fall reading program. Life continued its normal rhythm until she received an unexpected phone call at work. "Ms. Martinez?" The voice was unfamiliar but professional. "This is Dr. Patricia Williams from Metro Health Services. We need to discuss your recent health screening results." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Is something wrong?" "I'm afraid we found some concerning abnormalities in your blood work," Dr. Williams said in a serious tone. "We need you to come in for additional testing as soon as possible. Can you be at our clinic this afternoon?" "What kind of abnormalities?" Sarah asked, her heart beginning to race. She had always been healthy, rarely even catching a cold. "I'd rather discuss this in person," Dr. Williams replied. "Medical results are sensitive, and we want to make sure you understand everything clearly. Our clinic is located at 847 Medical Plaza Drive. Can you be here by 4 o'clock? Sarah's mind raced. She had never heard of Medical Plaza Drive, but then again she rarely needed to visit medical facilities outside of her regular doctor's office. The urgency in Dr. Williams's voice made her feel panicked. "What if I can't make it today? I'm at work and—" "Ms. Martinez," Dr. Williams interrupted gently but firmly. "I understand this is inconvenient, but these results suggest something that really shouldn't wait. We're talking about potentially serious health issues that could worsen rapidly if left untreated." The fear in Sarah's chest grew stronger. "Can you at least tell me what you found?" There was a pause before Dr. Williams responded. "Your blood work shows elevated levels of several concerning markers that could indicate exposure to toxic substances. Given the environmental issues in your area, this isn't entirely surprising, but we need to start treatment immediately." "Environmental toxins," That made horrible sense. Sarah remembered the construction dust, the strange taste in her water, the odd smells that Dr. Collins had asked about. She had been exposed to something dangerous, and now it was affecting her health. "Treatment?" she asked weakly. "Yes, but the good news is that we caught it early," Dr. Williams said reassuringly. "With prompt intervention, we can likely prevent any serious long-term effects. That's why timing is so critical." Sarah looked around the quiet library. Her students needed her, but what good would she be to them if her health deteriorated? Mrs. Henderson had mentioned feeling tired lately. Maybe she had been affected too. "All right," Sarah said. "I'll leave work early and be there at 4. "Excellent decision," Dr. Williams said, and Sarah could hear the relief in her voice. "Bring your insurance card and a form of identification. Oh, and Ms. Martinez, please don't eat anything for the next few hours. We may need to do additional blood work, and fasting will give us more accurate results." After hanging up, Sarah sat at her desk feeling numb. She had always taken care of herself, eaten well, exercised regularly. How could she have been exposed to something toxic? The construction site must have been worse than anyone realized. She asked her supervisor for the rest of the afternoon off, explaining that she had received concerning medical test results. Her boss, Mrs. Thompson, was understanding and told her to take whatever time she needed. The drive to Medical Plaza Drive took longer than expected. Sarah had to use her GPS to find the location, which turned out to be in an industrial area she rarely visited. The building was a plain, concrete structure that didn't look like the medical facilities she was used to, but many specialized clinics operated out of less glamorous locations to keep costs down. Inside, the waiting room was sparse but clean. A few other people sat quietly, looking as worried as she felt. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, checked her in and asked her to complete several forms about her medical history and insurance information. "Dr. Williams will see you shortly," the receptionist said. "She's running a few minutes late with another patient, but it shouldn't be much longer." Sarah filled out the paperwork, trying to remember details about her family's medical history. She had never paid much attention to what her grandparents had died from or what conditions ran in her family. Now she wished she had asked more questions during family gatherings. After about 20 minutes, a woman in a white coat emerged from the back offices. She was tall, professional-looking, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Sarah Martinez?" she called, and Sarah stood up nervously. Dr. Williams led her to a small examination room that looked standard enough. Examination table, charts on the walls, medical equipment on a rolling cart. Everything appeared legitimate and professional. "Please, have a seat," Dr. Williams said, settling behind a desk with a thick file folder. "I want to explain what we found in your blood work." She opened the folder and pulled out several pages covered with numbers, charts, and medical terminology that meant nothing to Sarah. The documents looked official, with letterheads and stamps that appeared authentic. "As I mentioned on the phone, we found elevated levels of several heavy metals in your blood," Dr. Williams began, pointing to various numbers on the reports. "Specifically, we're seeing concerning amounts of lead, mercury, and cadmium." Sarah felt sick. "How is that possible? I don't work around chemicals or anything dangerous." "Environmental exposure is more common than most people realize," Dr. Williams explained. "The construction in your area has likely disturbed, contaminated soil. When that dust becomes airborne, residents can inhale it. It can also contaminate groundwater, which explains the metallic taste you mentioned to Dr. Collins." The explanation made terrifying sense. Sarah remembered reading news stories about communities that had been poisoned by industrial contamination, families whose lives had been destroyed by exposure to toxic substances they never knew existed. "What does this mean for my health?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Williams looked at her with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Heavy metal poisoning can cause a range of serious problems if left untreated. Neurological damage, organ failure, increased cancer risk. The good news is that we have effective treatments, but we need to start them immediately. What kind of treatment? Chelation therapy, Dr. Williams said, pulling out a brochure with medical diagrams and explanations. It's a process where we introduce compounds into your bloodstream that bind to the heavy metals and help your body eliminate them. It's been used safely for decades. Sarah studied the brochure. The medical terminology was complex, but the basic concept seemed straightforward. Remove the poisons from her system before they caused permanent damage. How long does the treatment take? She asked. That depends on how much contamination we're dealing with, Dr. Williams replied. For someone with your levels, probably 6 to 8 weeks of treatments. We'd start with more frequent sessions, maybe 3 times a week, then taper off as your levels improve. The schedule sounded intensive, but if it would save her health, Sarah knew she had to do it. She thought about Mrs. Henderson and the other neighbors. Were they all walking around with toxic metals in their blood? What about my neighbors? Shouldn't they be tested too? Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. We're working through the affected area systematically. Some residents have already started treatment. Others, like yourself, are just getting their results now. We're trying to process everyone as quickly as possible. That was reassuring. At least the health department was being thorough and responsible about the situation. How much will this cost? Sarah asked, suddenly worried about the financial implications. Your insurance should cover most of it, Dr. Williams said. Chelation therapy for heavy metal poisoning is a recognized medical treatment. Our billing department will work with your insurance company to make sure you're not facing any unreasonable out-of-pocket costs. Sarah felt a wave of relief. Her insurance was good and she had some savings if needed. Her health was worth any amount of money. When can we start? She asked. Dr. Williams smiled. If you're ready, we can actually begin your first treatment today. I have an opening, and starting immediately will give us the best chance of preventing any long-term effects. Sarah agreed to start the treatment immediately. Dr. Williams led her to another room that looked like a medical infusion center with comfortable recliners and IV equipment. The setup reminded Sarah of the cancer treatment center where her aunt had received chemotherapy, which somehow made it feel more legitimate and professional. The procedure is quite simple, Dr. Williams explained as she prepared the IV equipment. We'll insert a small catheter into your arm, and the chelation solution will drip slowly into your bloodstream over about 2 hours. Most patients find it relaxing. You can read, use your phone, or just rest. Sarah settled into the recliner as Dr. Williams prepared her arm. The doctor's technique seemed professional and experienced. She found a vein easily and inserted the IV with minimal discomfort. There we go, Dr. Williams said, adjusting the drip rate on the IV bag. The solution contains EDTA, which is the compound that will bind to the heavy metals in your system. You might feel a slight tingling sensation or a metallic taste in your mouth. That's completely normal. As the treatment began, Sarah did indeed notice a strange metallic taste, which Dr. Williams had warned her about. She tried to read a book she had brought, but found it difficult to concentrate. The reality of her situation kept hitting her in waves. She was being poisoned by her own neighborhood. About halfway through the treatment, Sarah began feeling dizzy and nauseous. When she mentioned this to Dr. Williams, the doctor nodded knowingly. That's actually a good sign, she explained. It means the chelation is working. As your body starts eliminating the toxins, you may feel temporarily worse before you feel better. Think of it like having the flu. Unpleasant, but it means your immune system is fighting back. The explanation made sense, though Sarah felt increasingly uncomfortable. By the time the IV bag was empty, she was experiencing a pounding headache and felt weak and shaky. Will I be able to drive home? She asked, worried about her condition. You should be fine in a few minutes, Dr. Williams assured her. I'll have you rest here for a bit, and we'll make sure you're steady before you leave. Some patients feel a little lightheaded after their first treatment. Dr. Williams gave Sarah some crackers and juice, explaining that low blood sugar could contribute to the dizziness. After about 30 minutes, Sarah did feel somewhat better, though still not completely normal. Your next appointment should be Thursday, Dr. Williams said, handing Sarah a appointment card. Same time. Try to get plenty of rest tonight and drink lots of water to help flush the toxins from your system. The drive home was difficult. Sarah had to pull over twice because of dizziness and nausea. She told herself this was normal. Dr. Williams had warned her that the first treatment might be rough. By the time she reached her house, she felt exhausted and went straight to bed. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling even worse. The headache was intense and she felt weak and disoriented. She called in sick to work, which she rarely did, and spent the day resting and trying to stay hydrated as Dr. Williams had recommended. That evening, Mrs. Henderson knocked on her door. The elderly woman looked concerned. "Sarah, dear, are you feeling all right?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "I saw you come home early yesterday and you looked pale." Sarah explained about the health survey, the blood test results, and the chelation treatment. Mrs. Henderson listened with growing alarm. "That's strange," the older woman said. "I had a man in a white coat come to my house that same day, but he was from the Census Bureau, not Health Services. He was asking about household information for the 2025 census update." Sarah felt confused. "But I saw you talking to someone who looked like a health worker." "Oh, no, dear." Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "The man I spoke with definitely said he was from the Census Bureau. He asked about how many people lived in my house, their ages, employment information. Nothing about health at all." A cold feeling began growing in Sarah's stomach. "Did he take any blood samples or medical information?" "Heavens, no," Mrs. Henderson replied. "That would have been very suspicious. Census workers don't do medical testing." Sarah sat down heavily on her couch. Something was very wrong. If Mrs. Henderson had spoken with a census worker, then who had she seen talking to what looked like another health worker? "Mrs. Henderson, do you remember what your census worker looked like?" "Oh, yes, he was a nice young man, probably in his 30s, dark hair, wearing a regular business suit and tie. He showed me his official Census Bureau identification badge." That was nothing like the man who had visited Sarah. Dr. Collins had been older, with gray hair and glasses, wearing a white medical coat. And he had definitely introduced himself as being from Metro Health Services, not the Census Bureau. "Did anyone else in the neighborhood get health surveys?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. Mrs. Henderson thought for a moment. "Not that I know of. Mrs. Peterson across the street mentioned getting a visit from someone doing a neighborhood safety assessment, and the Johnsons had someone come by about updating property tax information. But I haven't heard anyone mention health surveys." Sarah's heart began racing. If the health survey wasn't real, then what had Dr. Collins actually been doing? Why had he taken her blood? And what was Dr. Williams actually putting into her IV? "Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you a favor," Sarah said, trying to stay calm. "Can you help me look up information about Metro Health Services? I want to verify that they're a legitimate organization." The two women spent the next hour searching, online using Mrs. Henderson's computer. They found no record of any organization called Metro Health Services operating in their county. The address where Sarah had received her treatment didn't appear in any medical directories. The phone number Dr. Williams had called from wasn't listed anywhere. "Sarah," Mrs. Henderson said quietly, "I think you need to call the police." Sarah knew Mrs. Henderson was right, but she felt paralyzed by fear and confusion. If Dr. Collins and Dr. Williams weren't real health workers, what had they done to her? What had been in that IV solution? Why had they targeted her specifically? "What if I'm wrong?" Sarah asked. "What if this is all some misunderstanding? Maybe they're a new organization that just hasn't updated their online presence yet." But even as she said it, Sarah knew she was grasping at straws. Legitimate medical organizations didn't operate without any online presence or official registration. Real doctors didn't conduct door-to-door health surveys. And actual medical treatments didn't make patients feel worse and worse each day. "Mrs. Henderson placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Dear, your instincts are telling you something is wrong. That's your body and mind trying to protect you. Don't ignore those feelings." That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. The more she analyzed the situation, the more obvious it became that she had been the victim of some kind of elaborate scam. But what was the purpose? If they wanted to rob her, there were much easier ways. If they wanted to hurt her, why the complicated charade with fake medical treatments? The most terrifying possibility was that they were using her as some kind of test subject. Maybe they were experimenting with drugs or testing the effects of various substances on unsuspecting victims. Sarah had heard horror stories about unethical medical experiments, but she had never imagined it could happen to an ordinary person in a quiet suburban neighborhood. By morning, Sarah had made her decision. She was going to call the police and report everything that had happened. She was also going to see her real doctor immediately and explain the situation. If someone had been injecting unknown substances into her body, she needed legitimate medical attention right away. But first, she wanted to gather as much evidence as possible. Sarah decided to drive back to the address where she had received the treatment and see what she could find. If the clinic was fake, maybe the building would provide clues about who was behind this scheme. The drive to Medical Plaza Drive filled Sarah with dread, but she knew she had to face whatever she might discover. Her health and safety, possibly, even her life, depended on finding out who had been masquerading as medical professionals and what they had really done to her. When Sarah arrived at 847 Medical Plaza Drive, her worst fears were confirmed. The building was completely empty, not just closed, abandoned. The windows were covered with brown paper, and there was a large "For Lease" sign posted by the front door. Dead weeds grew through cracks in the parking lot, suggesting the building had been vacant for months. Sarah sat in her car, staring at the building in disbelief. Just 2 days ago, she had been inside receiving medical treatment in what had appeared to be a fully functioning clinic. Now it looked like the building had been empty for years. She got out of her car and walked around the building, looking for any sign of recent activity. The back door was secured with a heavy chain and padlock that showed rust and weather damage. There were no fresh tire marks in the parking lot, no indication that anyone had been using the facility recently. Through a small gap in one of the paper-covered windows, Sarah could peer inside. The space was completely empty. No furniture, no medical equipment, no sign that it had ever been used as a healthcare facility. The fluorescent light fixtures hung dark and dusty from the ceiling. Sarah's phone rang, making her jump. The caller ID showed Metro Health Services. Her blood ran cold. Someone was calling her from the fake organization, even though their supposed clinic was obviously a sham. She answered the call, her heart pounding. "Hello? Ms. Martinez? This is Dr. Williams. I'm calling to remind you about your appointment this afternoon at 4 o'clock. It's important that you don't miss any treatments during this critical phase." Sarah looked at the abandoned building in front of her. "Dr. Williams, I'm standing outside your clinic right now, and the building is empty. It's been abandoned." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Dr. Williams spoke again, her voice had changed completely. The warm, professional tone was gone, replaced by something cold and threatening. "Ms. Martinez, I think you're confused. You need to continue your treatments. Stopping now could have very serious consequences for your health." "What did you inject into me?" Sarah demanded, fear making her voice shake. "What kind of sick game is this?" "This is no game," Dr. Williams replied, her voice now openly menacing. "You have something in your system that requires ongoing treatment. If you don't come in for your scheduled appointments, you're going to become very, very sick." The line went dead. Sarah stood in the empty parking lot, trembling with terror and rage. Someone had deliberately poisoned her and was now trying to force her to continue receiving unknown injections by threatening her health. She immediately called 911 and was connected to a dispatcher who took down all the details of her situation. The dispatcher told her that officers would meet her at the abandoned clinic location and that she should also go to the nearest hospital emergency room immediately. "Ma'am, if someone has been injecting you with unknown substances, you need medical attention right away," the dispatcher said. "Don't wait for the police investigation. Get to a hospital now." Sarah drove straight to County General Hospital, where she explained her situation to the emergency room staff. The ER doctor, Dr. Kim, listened with growing concern as Sarah described the fake health survey, the blood test, and the mysterious IV treatment. "We need to run a complete blood panel immediately," Dr. Kim said. "Can you describe exactly what the IV solution looked like?" Sarah tried to remember details about the IV bag and tubing. It was clear, like saline solution. The bag had medical labels on it, but I didn't pay close attention to what they said. Dr. Kim ordered comprehensive blood work to check for a wide range of substances, including heavy metals, drugs, toxins, and anything else that might have been introduced into Sarah's system. The tests would take several hours to complete. While waiting for the results, Sarah gave a detailed statement to Detective Rodriguez, who had been assigned to investigate her case. The detective took notes about every interaction she had had with Dr. Collins and Dr. Williams, including their physical descriptions and the specific things they had said. "This sounds like a very sophisticated operation," Detective Rodriguez said. "The fake health survey, the professional appearance, the medical equipment, someone put a lot of planning into this." "But why me?" Sarah asked. "I'm nobody special. I don't have money or connections or anything that would make me a valuable target." Detective Rodriguez had been investigating similar crimes for years. "There are several possibilities. You could have been chosen randomly as part of a larger scheme, or someone might be testing new drugs or substances and needed human subjects. There's also a chance this is connected to identity theft or insurance fraud." The blood test results came back that evening, and they were both puzzling and frightening. Sarah's blood showed elevated levels of several unusual compounds that Dr. Kim didn't immediately recognize. There were no signs of heavy metals or common poisons, but something was definitely in her system that shouldn't be there. "We're going to send these samples to a specialized toxicology lab," Dr. Kim explained. "They have equipment that can identify even trace amounts of unusual substances. It may take a few days to get complete results." Dr. Kim also started Sarah on supportive treatment to help her body eliminate whatever had been injected. IV fluids, vitamins, and medications to protect her liver and kidneys while the unknown substances were processed out of her system. Over the next few days, Sarah stayed with Mrs. Henderson while the police investigation continued. Detective Rodriguez discovered that the abandoned building had been rented 3 months earlier by someone using fake identification and paying cash. Security cameras from nearby businesses showed vehicles coming and going from the building, but the license plates had been obscured. The most chilling discovery came when police found that Sarah wasn't the only victim. Detective Rodriguez contacted other local law enforcement agencies and found similar cases in 3 neighboring counties. In each case, someone posing as a health worker had conducted fake surveys, taken blood samples, and then provided mysterious medical treatments at temporary clinics that disappeared shortly afterward. "We're dealing with an organized criminal network," Detective Rodriguez told Sarah. "They're targeting middle-class women living alone, probably because they're seen as less likely to be immediately missed if something goes wrong." The toxicology results finally came back from the specialized lab, and they revealed the truly horrific nature of what had been done to Sarah. The unknown substances in her blood were experimental pharmaceutical compounds that were still in early testing phases. Someone had been using her as a human test subject for drugs that hadn't been approved for human use. The good news is that none of the compounds appear to be immediately life-threatening, Dr. Kim explained. But we don't know what the long-term effects might be because these drugs have never been tested on humans before. Dr. Kim referred Sarah to a specialist in toxicology who would monitor her health over the coming months and years. There was no way to know what delayed effects the experimental drugs might have, so Sarah would need regular medical monitoring for the rest of her life. The psychological impact was almost as devastating as the physical threat. Sarah had always felt safe in her own neighborhood, trusted people who appeared professional and legitimate. Now she questioned every interaction, wondered about the motives of every stranger who approached her. Mrs. Henderson had become her strongest source of support. But even the elderly woman's kindness couldn't completely ease Sarah's fear and anger. Someone had violated her body and her trust in the most fundamental way possible. They had turned her into an unwilling experiment, gambling with her life and health for their own unknown purposes. The police investigation continued, but Detective Rodriguez warned Sarah that catching the perpetrators would be difficult. They appeared to be highly organized and careful to avoid leaving evidence. The fake identities, cash payments, and temporary locations all suggested a sophisticated criminal operation that had been planning these crimes for a long time. Sarah realized that her ordeal was far from over. Even if the immediate physical danger had passed, she would be living with the consequences of what had been done to her for years to come. The men in white coats had stolen more than just her blood. They had stolen her sense of security and her trust in the world around her. 3 weeks after discovering the truth about the fake medical treatments, Sarah's life had become a constant state of vigilance and fear. She had installed new security systems in her home, changed all her locks, and rarely went anywhere alone. The experimental drugs were slowly leaving her system, but the psychological damage felt permanent. Detective Rodriguez called her on a Tuesday morning with unexpected news. "Sarah, we've had a breakthrough in your case. We caught one of them." Sarah's heart leaped with a mixture of hope and dread. "What happened?" A woman in the next county called police about a suspicious health worker who came to her door, the detective explained. She was smart enough to ask for identification and then called the health department to verify his credentials. When she found out he was fake, she called 911 immediately. The police had staked out the woman's house and arrested Dr. Collins when he returned later that day, apparently hoping to catch the homeowner off guard. When they searched his van, they found medical equipment, fake identification documents, and most importantly, detailed records of dozens of victims. "He's talking," Detective Rodriguez said. "Apparently, he's part of a larger organization that's been conducting illegal human drug trials across multiple states. They target isolated individuals who are unlikely to be immediately missed or believed if they report unusual experiences." Sarah felt sick thinking about how many other people had been victimized. What kind of organization would do something like this? From what Collins is telling us, it's a combination of corrupt pharmaceutical researchers and organized crime, the detective replied. They're testing drugs that haven't been approved for human trials, collecting data on side effects and effectiveness. The information is then sold to legitimate pharmaceutical companies or used to develop street drugs. The scope of the operation was staggering. Collins revealed that the network had been operating for over 5 years, using dozens of fake identities and temporary locations to conduct their illegal experiments. They chose victims carefully, targeting people who lived alone, had minimal social connections, and were unlikely to be immediately missed if something went wrong. 6 months after her nightmare began, Sarah stood in a federal courthouse watching Dr. Rebecca Chen and James Collins receive their sentences. Chen was given 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, assault, and conducting illegal human experiments. Collins received 12 years for his role in the operation. During the sentencing hearing, Sarah had the opportunity to address the court and her attackers directly. She had spent weeks preparing her victim impact statement, trying to find words that could adequately express the depth of what had been taken from her. "You didn't just inject experimental drugs into my body," she told Chen and Collins, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You injected fear, doubt, and mistrust that will stay with me for the rest of my life. You turned my own neighborhood into a place where I feel unsafe. You made me question every interaction with medical professionals, every knock on my door, every person who claims to be trying to help." Sarah looked directly at Dr. Chen as she continued. "You had legitimate medical training. You understood the oath to do no harm. Instead, you chose to use your knowledge and credentials to prey on innocent people who trusted you because of your education and professional appearance." The courtroom was silent except for Sarah's voice. Other victims and their families filled the benches, many of them nodding as she spoke. "The physical effects of what you did to me are finally starting to fade," Sarah continued. "But the psychological damage may never fully heal. I installed security systems in my home. I verify the credentials of every service person who comes to my door. I research every medical professional before I allow them to treat me. You forced me to become suspicious and paranoid, traits that go against my natural personality." Judge Morrison listened intently as Sarah described how the crime had affected every aspect of her life. She had taken a leave of absence from her job as a librarian because she couldn't concentrate or trust her memory. She had spent thousands of dollars on additional medical testing and consultations to monitor the long-term effects of the experimental drug. "But I want you to know that you didn't break me," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "I survived what you did, and I'm using my experience to help other people recognize and avoid the kind of predators you represent. Every person who hears my story and becomes more cautious as a result is a victory against what you tried to do." After the sentencing, Detective Rodriguez congratulated Sarah on her courage in speaking out. The investigation that began with her case had led to the arrest of 7 additional people and the shutdown of similar operations in 4 other states. "Your willingness to come forward and share your story probably saved hundreds of other people from becoming victims," the detective told her. "That takes real strength." The civil lawsuit against Chen, Collins, and their accomplices was still ongoing. Sarah's attorney was confident they would recover significant damages, though money could never truly compensate for what she had endured. More importantly to Sarah, the lawsuit would help ensure that the victims received proper medical monitoring. For years to come, Dr. Kim continued to oversee Sarah's medical care, conducting regular blood tests to monitor for any delayed effects from the experimental antidepressant. So far, the results had been encouraging. The drug appeared to be completely eliminated from her system, and Sarah's cognitive function was returning to normal. "You were incredibly lucky," Dr. Kim told her during a 6-month follow-up appointment. "The compound they gave you could have caused permanent neurological damage if the dosage had been higher or if you had continued the treatments longer." Sarah had also been working with a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. Dr. Lisa Park helped her process the complex emotions surrounding her victimization and develop strategies for rebuilding her sense of safety and trust. "It's normal to feel angry, violated, and suspicious after what you experienced," Dr. Park explained. "The goal isn't to go back to exactly how you were before. That person was vulnerable in ways that made you an easy target. Instead, we're working to help you develop healthy skepticism while still being able to form trusting relationships." The therapy was helping, but some changes in Sarah's personality seemed permanent. She would never again open her door to unexpected visitors without thoroughly verifying their identity. She researched every medical professional extensively before agreeing to treatment. She had learned to trust her instincts when something felt wrong, even if she couldn't immediately identify why. Mrs. Henderson had become more than just a neighbor. She was now one of Sarah's closest friends and strongest supporters. The elderly woman had helped Sarah through the darkest moments of her recovery and continued to check on her daily. "You've shown remarkable strength through all of this," Mrs. Henderson told Sarah one evening as they sat on her porch. "I'm proud of how you've turned a terrible experience into something that helps other people." Sarah had indeed become an advocate for victims of medical fraud and experimental abuse. She spoke at conferences for law enforcement officers, teaching them to recognize the signs of illegal human experimentation. She also worked with consumer protection agencies to develop educational materials warning people about medical scams. The support group for victims of Chen's network continued to meet monthly. Many of the members had become close friends, bonded by their shared experience and commitment to helping each other heal. They also worked together to push for stronger laws against illegal human experimentation and better protections for potential victims. "We can't change what happened to us," Maria Santos said during one of their meetings, "but we can make sure that people like Chen and Collins face serious consequences, and we can educate the public so this doesn't happen to others. The case had also led to important changes in how law enforcement agencies handled reports of suspicious medical activity. Previously, many police departments didn't have protocols for investigating fake medical practitioners. Now, training programs had been developed to help officers recognize and respond to these types of crimes. A year after her ordeal began, Sarah felt ready to return to work. The library had held her position open, and her colleagues welcomed her back with understanding and support. Being surrounded by books and helping students with their research felt like a return to normalcy, though Sarah knew she would never be quite the same person she had been before. "I'm different now," she told Dr. Park during one of their sessions. "I'm more careful, more skeptical, less trusting. In some ways, those aren't bad changes. I was probably too naive and trusting before, but I hate that I had to learn these lessons through such a traumatic experience." Dr. Park nodded. "You've developed what we call healthy paranoia, the ability to be appropriately cautious without letting fear control your life. That's actually a valuable skill that will protect you in the future." On the first anniversary of Dr. Collins' visit to her home, Sarah decided to do something positive to mark the date. She organized a community safety workshop at the local community center, teaching her neighbors how to verify the credentials of service workers and recognize common scams. "The goal isn't to make everyone suspicious and fearful," Sarah told the audience of about 50 people. "It's to help you develop the skills to protect yourselves while still being able to trust and connect with others." She showed them how to verify professional licenses online, explained red flags that might indicate fraudulent activity, and provided resources for reporting suspicious behavior. Several attendees shared their own experiences with questionable door-to-door salespeople or service workers. Mrs. Henderson introduced Sarah at the workshop, praising her courage in turning a personal tragedy into a community resource. "Sarah could have retreated from the world after what happened to her," the elderly woman said. "Instead, she chose to use her experience to protect all of us. That's the kind of neighbor and friend we all hope to have." As Sarah looked out at the faces in the audience, her neighbors, friends, and fellow community members, she felt a sense of purpose that had emerged from her ordeal. The men in white coats had tried to make her a victim, but she had refused to remain powerless. She had taken back control of her story and was using it to create positive change. Dr. Collins and Dr. Chen were in prison, their criminal network was shut down, and new laws were being written to prevent similar crimes. Most importantly, hundreds of people who heard Sarah's story would be better prepared to protect themselves from predators who exploited trust and authority. The nightmare that began with a knock on her door had transformed into a mission to protect others. Sarah would never be grateful for what happened to her, but she had found a way to create meaning from her suffering. And in helping others recognize the danger of trusting every man in white, she had discovered her own strength and resilience.